If you're a normal human in Dragon Ball, you're gonna have some bad luck. And in the case of Bulma, being friends with superheroes doesn't always put you in the best of situations. But what are Bulma's most bizarre adventures in Dragon Ball history? On a scale of 1 through 10, these moments can range from very perverted to extremely scary. So for this year's Halloween special, we will cover the first and only episode of Bulma's Bizarre Adventures. Coming in at number 10, we have Bulma being captured by a pterodactyl. Now the funny thing about this moment is that it takes place in the very first episode of Dragon Ball, and while Bulma ran behind a rock to take a leak, she found herself being taken as a human snack for a pterodactyl. To make matters worse, the pterodactyl that captured Bulma was an anthropomorphic talking pterodactyl that tricked Goku into being tied up. And after flying away with Bulma, we see Goku asking Bulma and the pterodactyl how long he should wait before breaking out of the ropes. And we see here that Goku being naive truly added to the tension of Bulma being in such a dangerous situation. But to top everything off, we see that Bulma eventually wet herself anyways after Goku's power pole saved her life. So we can safely say that Toriyama demonstrated the flaws of being a normal human from the very beginning of Dragon Ball. But because Bulma has faced much worse in the Dragon Ball series, this moment ultimately only got one bizarre point. But as we transition on to number 9, we have Bulma flirting with Zamasu in Dragon Ball Super. Now Bulma has often used her good looks to get out of a lot of crazy situations. An example of this would be in Dragon Ball, where she unsuccessfully failed in using her charm against General Blue, for quite obvious reasons. But Zamasu was a completely different case from General Blue. Not only did she directly confront a planet-busting level villain face to face, but she actually had the courage to use her charm in buying time at such an older age. In addition, what made this moment hilarious is the fact that Zamasu is a Supreme Kai in training and also hates mortals. And remember, future Bulma was killed by Zamasu in Goku Black. So the fact that her present counterpart actually tried to buy time by seducing Zamasu out of all Dragon Ball villains truly stands out in Dragon Ball history. And when you look at how silly this moment was as compared to how serious the entire arc was as a whole, this moment definitely warrants at least 2 bizarre points. But as we move on to number 8, we have Bulma being turned into a carrot by Boss Rabbit. Now in Dragon Ball, Bulma has been many things. One time she shrunk herself to fly on a Nimbus cloud with Goku. In another situation, she was turned into candy by Super Buu and eaten. But what separates being turned into a carrot over those moments is how bizarre it actually happened. You see, Super Buu actually has the ability to turn people into candy, and Bulma used the device to shrink herself. In this scenario, Bulma essentially turned herself into a carrot as she slapped Boss Rabbit's hand as a form of aggression. And what makes this moment even more bizarre is the fact that Puar turned himself into a bird to steal Bulma back. In addition, we also see that Puar turned himself into Boss Rabbit to try and intimidate him into returning Bulma back to normal. And things get even more insane when we see Goku eventually sending Boss Rabbit to the moon. However, since Bulma was unconscious while she was a carrot, her experience was not as memorable as some of the other moments on this list, and this is why this moment only got 3 bizarre points. Now as we climb up the list to number 7, we have Bulma being captured by space children. And while this moment is completely filler, it is the definition of a bizarre moment. To begin, our heroes found themselves in contact with a mirror spaceship that collided with theirs, and during the entire investigation, Bulma was walking around in underwear and a small tank top to say the least. Either way, after our heroes found food on a table, Bulma was nearly killed by a trap knife. After this, she found herself being grabbed by a robot and held in a seductive position while being cornered by a group of children. Keep in mind that these children were holding Bulma at gunpoint. And after Bulma was saved by Krillin and Gohan, she found herself piloting this mirror spaceship to these same children that captured her to avoid an onslaught of upcoming meteors. And since Krillin and Bulma were the only adults during this sequence, it truly adds up to how bizarre this actually was to be the 2 adults in this entire childlike scenario. And because this adventure was terrifying, random, and bizarre all at once, it gets a grand total of 4 bizarre points. But to close out the bottom half of Bulma's Bizarre Adventures, adventure number 6 is Bulma nearly burning to death. The situation begins with Goku, Krillin, and Bulma falling through a floor and encountering lava. With Goku being at the top, Bulma in the middle, and Krillin at the bottom, Bulma is essentially sandwiched in between 2 kids. But what's hilarious about this moment is the fact that it mixes a dangerous scenario with perversion. While Krillin is holding onto Bulma's butt, he's pulling on her underwear to survive. And the hilarious part about this is that even in a life or death situation, Bulma is irritated by this and is kicking Krillin for holding her and looking at her undergarments. And while all of this is happening, naive Goku is thinking that the lava is jelly and doesn't even realize how dangerous the situation actually is. And what makes everything worse is that after everyone falls down, Bulma's butt gets burned as Goku tries to propel everyone upwards with his power pole. In addition, it doesn't help that right after Bulma nearly dies, she gets chased by a giant pirate robot known as the Kaizoku Robo after nearly burning to death. And the combination of dirty jokes in such a life-threatening scenario gives this moment 5 bizarre points. But as we enter the upper half of Bulma's Bizarre Adventures, we have Bulma encountering a giant crab on planet Namek at number 5. Now to begin, Bulma's Dragon Ball is taken away by 2 Frieza soldiers and she's captured to be taken to Frieza for interrogation. However, Bulma manages to outsmart these soldiers by telling them that they should use the Dragon Balls for themselves. This all leads to a sequence of Bulma using an underwater Capsule Corp machine to lead these soldiers into a giant crab that eventually kills them. But the insanity of this adventure is the fact that Bulma completely evaded a dangerous situation by outsmarting her foes. To think that she used the machine to lure Frieza soldiers into finding a giant crab is an insane idea. And the fact that the Frieza soldiers were dumb enough to think that the crab eggs were Dragon Balls also adds to how insane this actually is. But what set this moment apart from others is the fact that it actually worked. And after surviving a battle between the Frieza soldiers and a crab, Bulma managed to reclaim the stolen Dragon Ball and bring this filler episode back into full circle. Only Bulma could pull off this unlikely outcome, and this is why adventure number 5 earns a total of 6 bizarre points. But as we pull towards number 4, we have Bulma discovers the Invisible Man. Now during the Fortune Teller Baba arc, Yamcha got into a little bit of trouble facing against an invisible foe. And after Goku flew over with Master Roshi and Bulma to help, Krillin comes up with a brilliant idea. He decides to pull down Bulma's top to make Master Roshi bleed for Yamcha to find the Invisible Man with Roshi's blood. And when you really think about this moment is arguably the best source of perverted humor that Dragon Ball has to offer. And the fact that Krillin was so precise with the angle of Master Roshi's head, along with where Bulma stood, truly added to how bizarre this moment actually was. Also, Bulma was so embarrassed by her flashing that she actually looked away from the fight despite helping Yamcha win. Just notice how everyone is celebrating while Bulma is still in shock. And the contrast between Bulma's reaction and her friends truly creates and provides such subtle humor in early Dragon Ball. And no one in their right mind could have predicted that Master Roshi's perversion could help win an actual fight. So because Bulma was brought over to help in such a ridiculous situation, this adventure easily warrants 7 bizarre points. However, as we arrive at number 3 on our list, we have Bulma nearly being abused by the Red Ribbon Army. For a fun fact, the 2 Red Ribbon Army soldiers that confronted Bulma have the exact same design of 2 of Boss Rabbit's henchmen from earlier on. For Bulma's introduction with these soldiers, it would be them firing thousands of rounds at Bulma while flying on helicopters. And when you put this in perspective, Bulma as a normal human outrunning thousands of bullets from Red Ribbon Army soldiers truly captures the extent of a gag anime. But what's notable about this scene is that after the soldiers stopped shooting at her, they started hitting on her. And in the Japanese version of the scene, Bulma mentions, "Do you want to do stuff to me that's not appropriate for a gag anime?" Right here, Bulma is basically breaking the fourth wall by talking about Dragon Ball as an anime and a manga, and both the Japanese and English dub imply that both soldiers were going to forcefully abuse Bulma. Luckily, she managed to escape by tricking them into falling down into a pit, and while this scenario is very similar to Bulma outsmarting Frieza's soldiers, this scenario implied a very serious form of abuse to a young woman. And for a Western audience, Bulma only being 16 makes this seem even worse than the Japanese version. So even if Dragon Ball made light humor of this scene, the serious implication of this moment gives this adventure 8 bizarre points for Bulma nearly being killed and forcefully abused. Furthermore, for our runner-up on this list, it involves Bulma switching bodies with the frog Ginyu. In terms of unusual events that can happen to a normal person, you can honestly argue for this being number 1 on this list. And this all began with Ginyu being a friendly frog and handing Bulma a cloth that greatly distinguished him from all of the other frogs on planet Namek. After this, Bulma makes friends with Ginyu as a frog, and we can even see her feeding Ginyu pudding and chocolate to top things off. But where things truly get crazy is where Bulma pulls out a translating machine to talk to the frog Ginyu. And have you ever asked yourself what language Bulma programmed her device to talk to an alien frog? Either way, what's hilarious about all of this is that Bulma creates her own doom by giving Ginyu the opportunity to yell change with the translator, and everything gets even better when we see Bulma trying to explain to Gohan what happens while she was a frog. Luckily, Bulma managed to get her body back by intercepting the change beam intended for Piccolo, but to make matters even more bizarre, after Bulma gets her body back, we see her giving Ginyu a history lesson on Goku's character. So when you honestly analyze this bizarre adventure, it can get no lower than 9 bizarre points. But as we conclude the last and ultimate bizarre moment, we have Bulma bribing Master Roshi for a Dragon Ball. And when you compare this moment to number 2, it was quite difficult to argue this being more bizarre than switching bodies with a frog. But what sold Bulma bribing Master Roshi as the most bizarre moment on this list is the fact that everything in this moment had a build-up to it. Keep in mind that there are 4 characters that were directly involved of Bulma revealing her little treat to Master Roshi. These characters include Bulma, Master Roshi, Goku, and Umigami, also known as Turtle. In other words, a young girl, a naive kid with a tail, an old man, and an animal were all part of this equation. And it all began with Goku innocently inspecting Bulma to see what body parts she actually has. After this, Toriyama brilliantly made us forget that Bulma's underwear was pulled off. So when the moment of truth arrived with Bulma bribing Master Roshi, she wasn't even aware that she showed more than what was expected. And good old naive Goku didn't even realize the damage he inflicted on his friend. And we can all agree that Master Roshi would definitely approve of this moment getting 10 bizarre points. And while we're on the subject of Bulma, check out Bulma vs Dr. Gero to see which genius is smarter. In addition, you would also like to check out Is Dragon Ball Truly for Kids? Or What If Goku and Vegeta Married Each Other's Wives to understand more mature Dragon Ball topics. And until next time, stay cool and stay safe, my friends.